Lloyd Vance Insider Football is back on 1029 The Game, the Coast Sports Digital Network. So glad everybody can be with us this evening. Early on, I felt like I was on the wheels of steel, Kevin. I don't know if you knew about scratching records back in the day. Ricky, Wicky, Wicky, going back and forth. But we finally got the sound right. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing good, Lloyd. I'm doing good. And that's a wrap on the season. Let's get into some action here.
Oh my God. Yeah, we finally last week where we finally talk about 16 games, five of which probably don't mean a damn thing other than draft order. But yeah, the regular season wraps 18 weeks. Everybody gets a bye, so 17 games. I mean, Kevin, the more I see week 18, I'm like, all right, play 16 games. It was fine. You know what I mean? 16 games was fine. All these teams are putting guys on IR, bringing guys up from the practice squad. You don't know half these guys are. It's a glorified preseason week. I mean, are they really going to go to 19 weeks and 18 games? I know money's going to have a factor in it.
Yeah, it's happening. That was the whole thing. It was this one extra game just to get everyone used to it. And it's like, well, since we pushed it one, nobody likes odd numbers. So, yeah, let's push one more onto it. It's about greed, it's about ownership getting their money. And yeah, it's not a great product on there. I will give the NFL credit. At least they put the games on national TV that meant something. So it's like at least you didn't have to watch some really bad games that didn't mean anything. But yeah, it's a diluted product. Definitely the last week of the season.
Yeah, and I'm watching some guys play. I'm like, oh, man, who is that guy? And it was just, but it is what it is. And I did enjoy the games, and it was fun watching them. Me and my boys, we sat around, watched all the games all day Sunday, and it's remind me of the old days, where everything pretty much is on one day, everything's on the line, and you're watching Red Zone all day, and it's just fast and furious. So I'm going to start though with the game of the night was in the evening, and they got it right. It was on NBC. Uh, Started a little slow, but the Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Baltimore Ravens 26-24. It was a game where fourth quarter was incredible, back and forth action. And then, unfortunately, like I thought it would come down to the kickers, and unfortunately, it was a negative situation in terms of these kickers.
Yeah, it's I don't know. There's a lot of questions after this game. There's most definitely. There's the Harbaugh question coming, back. There's Aaron Rodgers going forward into a postseason. Is this his last run? Loop kicking for Baltimore. And it's like I've seen the thing all over the internets where this guy bets 100 grand and he's like eating 5 pound lobsters. Baltimore's winning, and then he's like, lost 50. Basically lost 100 grand because he could have won 150. It's just like watching these guys epic turns on this game as it went on. But the one thing I have to point out in my work fantasy football league counted this past week's games, which of course I did not finish in the money. Strong number 5 position again for me. Two guys going at it. One guy has somebody playing in the Sunday night game. And who does he have? He's down by 12 points. He has Zay Flowers, who has 2 catches for 24 yards the whole game, blows up for 2 huge touchdowns, and finishes with almost 30 points. I just can't imagine being the guy watching Zay Flowers score against you when you thought you had this season won.
Yeah, it's crazy, the end of fantasy football season, and it's nail biter time. And in my personal battle that everybody wants to know about, Nate beat me, everybody. So, he comes on a show and he always says, Dad, I know more than you. I know game you don't. That's his favorite line. I'll let him have his victory. Nate's team beat me 164 to 142. It got close at the end, though, because he had a big lead, Kevin. And then we went into Monday night, and I had Bijan Robinson,
Oh
who
my.
had a game for the ages in week 17. I mean, he scored 39.9 points. He was running up and down the field, and he said he wasn't sweating, but Nathan was. And so, but it was a good win for him. He had his guy all season, and he talked to you about this guy, and he carried him. Christian McCaffrey. I mean, we'll talk about him in a minute when you're talking about playing the Eagles, but how great of a season has he had in week 17 against the in a win against the Bears. 23 carries, 140. He had a touchdown. He had 4 receptions, 41 yards. Just a PPR machine, fantasy wise.
Well, that's the thing. It's like everyone, when you draft in the first round, you want McCaffrey taken before your pick because you don't want to have the decision not to draft him. Because when healthy, he's one of probably the best football players over the last 10 years. I've definitely put him in the top three. And the fact is, if you pick him, though, there is a huge, huge gamble that he will get hurt. Well, he didn't get hurt this year, and it paid off for the people that picked him.
Yeah, and that's what I told Nate picked him. I was like, oh, he's going to get hurt. You're going to regret that. And all season, it didn't happen. And he showed his durability. We'll see how all these touches factor in the next couple of years because he is approaching kind of 30ish range. But I think he's working his way into the conversation of being a Hall of Famer. So
Yeah.
yeah, Christian McCaffrey, great season for him fantasy football wise, and congrats to the winners out there. But every year's different. Every year's different. So we'll see. But getting back to the game, the Steelers, I didn't think they did anything extra special in this game. They kind of just stayed the course. TJ Watt had that interception. Harbaugh, I thought, was a little too aggressive early on doing his Dan Campbell imitation, going for it on fourth down when he probably shouldn't have, and not getting it. And just talk a little bit about the Steelers and what you see them doing, in, if at all, in the playoffs. And Aaron Rodgers, he did have some big throws. I thought Austin, I could have made that throw. He was wide open at the end.
Uh, once again, Tomlin needs to win a playoff game. It's been a while since he's gotten one. That would do wonders for that team. How far are they going? They're not going far. If they win one game, I think that would be an upset, to be honest. Because myself, I'd lean towards the Texans in that game, even though it's a road game for them.
Yeah,
So yeah, so if they can get that one win, I think that you call that season a win with an aging Aaron Rodgers.
yeah, and we'll preview that game in a minute. And I definitely tended to lean towards that because the Steelers, as you said, 2015-16 was the last time they won a playoff game underneath Mike Tomlin, and you know, good win for them. Boswell missed that extra point, and you're thinking, oh man, now it's their turn to finally feel the angst. And Loop, you got to feel for the kid. I knew he was making that kick, Kevin. I was like, you could see it on his face, man. He was scared. The deer in the headlights. Mind me of like, I don't. You're an old school movie guy, Hoosiers. They bring Ollie off the bench, and he's
Mhm.
got to make a free throw to send him to the championship round or something like that, and he looks scared to death, and that's what Luke did, and Mike Tirico. I don't think he meant to, but he kind of jinxed him. He's like, well, he's a good kid, and this is a big situation for him, but he was kind of hedging his bets there, and unfortunately, he shanked the mess out of that. And talk about Lamar Jackson. A lot of people all during the game, it was like, all right, well, he's playing like he has all season, kind of crappy, but then he picked it up, as you said, those two long passes to Zay Flowers and for TDs, and then that last throw on fourth down to Likely. That was an incredible throw, and you're like, oh, maybe it's finally Baltimore's time, and he can get to the playoffs and make some noise.
Well, you got to think Lamar had a little bit of rust on him coming off, missing some games there. He had to shake that loose. That being said, they should have won the game. I don't know who you actually want to blame on that. It's easy to blame a kicker. Ask Scott Norwood. Ask, was it Anderson from Minnesota? Like he missed the kick. The guy was perfect all year. So it's like it's easy to blame the kicker, but there's reasons that led to that loss. Now, the question I think that comes into play is because we talked about before, Kansas City's down. So it's like if Lamar or Josh Allen don't get to a Super Bowl this year, which obviously Lamar is not, when's it going to happen for him?
Yeah, Kevin, that's a great question, and you start thinking, okay, should this whole operation be changed there in Baltimore? And I know DaCosta's been there at the GM position since Newsom left, and he kind of grew up in an organization. They have Harbaugh there, who's been there since I think '08, and it's just like, okay, what are they going to do in this situation? Like, are they going to blow this thing up? Did they bring him back? I've heard all along that Steve Bisciotti, the owner of the Ravens, really he likes this setup. He likes He likes John Harbaugh, and he likes Lamar Jackson, but maybe change is needed here. And do you think it's coming?
I'd be surprised if it does. It reminds me of harkens back, I should say, to when Andy Reid was with Philadelphia. It's like he was a good coach. They had success with him, but it was time for a change. The thing is, the difference is those Eagles teams they just tanked out Andy's last year. They were done. I mean, Harbaugh's team. If you think you got a healthy Lamar, that team's probably in the playoffs and wins that division. So the question is, do you make change for the sake of change? And the same question would be on Pittsburgh right now on Tomlin if they didn't make the playoffs because those guys have been so entrenched there. It's like, who are you bringing in? That's always a question. Who's going to be better than what you have?
Yeah, and these two situations with the Ravens and the Steelers, I think it's really up to the coaches. They're the longest tenured coaches in the National Football League, both of them. Mike Tomlin been there, I think, since '07. As I said, Harbaugh since '08. It's been a long time, and they both are Super Bowl champions, and that gets you some equity with the ownership group when you have that Super Bowl in your pocket. But from what I'm hearing, I think Harbaugh's going to get the chance to come back now. Lamar, I don't think he's going anywhere. I think those reports out of the Baltimore Sun that he was falling asleep in meetings and he was on the outs, etc. No matter what, he's still his guy. He's won a lot of games. He's two-time MVP. So I say Harbaugh comes back, Lamar comes back. Now the Steelers are interesting. I'm hearing Mike Tomlin may want to take some time off and possibly, then decide his next move because he is kind. I think he may be kind of fatigued in the situation there with the Steelers. The fans always kind of after him, and he's looking a little beat up. So after Boswell missed that kick, he was probably thinking, "Oh God, next thing, my pink slip's coming."
Mm. Yeah, that's. I mean, Pittsburgh, as we know, they're not very rash when it comes to making head coaching changes. So I think it will be up to Tomlin when he wants to leave that job. But the thing being, it's like someone would hire him in a heartbeat. It's the whole thing is like being in that city with that constant scrutiny that's going on him. Is it, the way the ownership's running things, does he want to go someplace else that's a more flashier landing spot for free agents? That's going to be all on him.
Yeah. So, good solid win for the Steelers. They move on. You got to tip your cap to Kenneth Gainwell. He played a great game for them. He was named their MVP for the season. I mean, he ran the ball effectively, caught it effectively. Then they also had Fryermuth contribute here and there, and Warren. Um, but the big thing is their defense. Their defense kind of was getting pushed around and allowed a lot of big plays. And you wonder if Hamilton hadn't got knocked out in this game, what would have been for the Ravens. But the Ravens got to pick it up, move towards the off season, and they're 8-9. They'll be picking kind of in no man's land. But Harbaugh, to his credit, put his arm around Loop, and he's going to stick with him.
Well, Loop had a good season for him. It's not like the kid was missing kicks all year long. When he missed like 3 or 4, I think. Did he choke in that situation? Oh yeah. Oh yeah, he definitely did. He even admitted he mishit the ball. It's like, yeah, once again, you have one thing to do. It's just hit the ball. I don't care if you miss it, just hit it solidly. But when you're like, I mishit it, it's like, all right, the moment was a little too big for you in that situation. And kickers, like I've mentioned before, are like closers in baseball. It's very cerebral with them. They live in their own domes. So the question is now Loop has a whole off season to think about this. How is he going to come back next year?
Yeah, and hopefully fans don't send him that Scott Norwood type correspondence. They're
Mhm.
threatening him, his family, and all that stuff. Seemed like a really nice young man, and it's just unfortunate it had to come down to that. But he missed a kick, and you move on. The Steelers, as we say, 10-7. They win the awful AFC North. They're going in as the number 4 seed in the AFC. So the whole slate is set. We'll go over the games in a minute. We'll pick them soon at the end of the show. But just to get everybody ready, Seattle gets the bye in the NFC. They're 14-3. Denver gets the bye in the AFC, 14-3. So Saturday night you'll have the Rams against Carolina Panthers, the Green Bay Packers at Chicago, and that one's on Prime. We can go over. We know how much Kevin loves, on the streaming services, not a main network. Sunday, it'll be Buffalo at Jacksonville on CBS. at 1, San Francisco at Philadelphia on Fox at 4:30. So all my Philly people that we've talked to, they're feeling good about that time. They like that time for the game. It's right in the middle there. It'll probably be their favorite guys, Buck and Troy Aikman there, and they'll probably yell at them in the press box. How much they love Troy Aikman, Philly people. And then you have the Chargers at New England, 8 o'clock on NBC. And then this is what I wanted to get your take on too. They stretched it out to Monday. Now they got a Monday nighter, so you and I will go against it next week. It's Houston Texans at the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's on ESPN.
Yeah, it's once again they stretch it out, and whoever plays the Monday night game, because you don't know until they announce it. Of course, you're automatically at a disadvantage. The winner is for next week because you're probably going to have less time to prepare possibly than you would have. And it's once again, it's for ad revenue. It's for more gambling to be spread out over the weekend. I mean, everyone's got their hand in somebody else's pocket for this. Do I like it? Yeah, I'll watch it when we get off doing our show. But do I think it's right? No, I don't.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we'll preview all those, like I was saying. And the other big story, obviously, today is it's get the hell out of here Monday when you get coaches fired, GMs, uh, getting their walking papers. And we already knew that the Tennessee Titans and the New York Giants have new coaches that they're looking for. But the Atlanta Falcons, they got rid of Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot, the general manager, today. Uh, Also, the Cleveland Browns relieved Stefanski. That was kind of something we had alluded to last time we talked. Uh, Pete Carroll and the Raiders, they have parted ways. And then Jonathan Gannon, that was the one I knew was coming. All when Nate all summer he was saying, "Oh, watch out for them Cardinals." I said,
Hmm.
"Gannon stinks. He's going to get fired." Well, today he did. So you have 6 openings. And then there's 2 GM openings. The Miami Dolphins, as we knew, got rid of Chris Greer, and then Fontenot with the Atlanta Falcons. So when we start looking at these openings, do you see any of these coaches first bouncing back and getting a job right away?
Stefanski, I see getting some calls. Stefanski could probably line up a job this week. I wouldn't be shocked at all by that. Raheem Morris, the thing is with Raheem Morris is he finished the year strong. He had like a beat up team and he rallied them together to be competitive and win some football games. Now Fontenot, the GM, yeah, he need to be gone because the fact that you signed Kirk Cousins and draft Michael Penix Jr. That's basically you sign your own death warrant there. My question is, how is there still a GM for the New York Football Giants? I am amazed. It has to be because he can draft well for the IR. I just don't understand how he keeps that job.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that Joe Shane stays and Dayball gets let go around midseason, and Mike Kafka uh, just lose, baby, and he's an interim coach and he wins 2 in a row. They go out with a whimper. They're now on they're in the 5th position going into the draft, and yeah, I think Mara just didn't want to wipe the egg off his face in terms of getting rid of Joe Shane. Everything was on tape last year from that Hard Knocks, and they followed him all season, and that was just a mess. So, yeah, I was surprised they didn't lose both of them at the same time. But he's going to these GMs. A lot of them have 9 lives. You see Ballard with the Colts. He's been there a long time. I thought maybe he'd get his pink slip, but they kept him. Even with the Bengals, Duke Tobin gets to keep his job, and I think a lot of it is their fates are tied to the coaches that they bring in, and unfortunately for Fontenot, he brought in Morris, and Morris just was not getting it done, and we'll see from there. But um, all these situations we talk about, so Fontenot, they're looking for a new GM, but Joe Shane stays with the Giants. Andrew Barry gets to stay with the Cleveland Browns, even though he had a big hand in all that mess. And you're still wondering who picked Shador Sanders, who picked Gabriel, and uh, why weren't they playing Sanders earlier? So that's probably a factor in that situation. But I think it's Cleveland being Cleveland. So Barry stays there in with Vegas. John Spytek came over from Tampa Bay. He has tentacles to Tom Brady. He gets to stay, and old Pete Carroll, they kick him out the door. You have Monty Osenfort with the Arizona Cardinals. he's staying at GM position, and they get rid of Jonathan Gannon, a guy he handpicked, by the way, and he's getting his pink slip. And then with Tennessee, you have Mike Borgonzi there. He comes over from the Chiefs, and then he gets rid of Callahan. And I think a lot of times these guys have to get with someone that they have familiarity with. I know in Buffalo they hired Sean McDermott, and then they brought in Brandon Bean, his one of his buddies from the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, it definitely goes. It helps the situation out when there's familiarity between the GM, the head coach, and everything. The Cardinal situation. The thing is, these jobs that are becoming available, most of them aren't good jobs. There's a reason they're available, and Gannon's out with the Cardinals. You know why? Because Kyler Murray's a bum. Yeah, I had to say it one last time this year. Kyler Murray was a bum, and that's why he's gone. I mean, the Raiders' job, so you have the number one pick, but you know how many picks you need to make the Raiders good? It's not like it's different in the NFL than it is more so than any other sport. You need multiple players. It's not just like one guy is going to be the saving grace of your franchise. So chances are the Raiders, they're going to probably take a quarterback. We got plenty of time to talk about all that because they need one. But I mean, there's a lot of jobs that are open right now that aren't that appealing. Atlanta actually is probably the better one because you have Bijan there already.
Right. And the thing is, some of them have some good selling points. Like the Giants, you do have a young quarterback. You do have Scadaboo possibly coming back at the running back position, Malik Neighbors, some pieces on defense. But as you said, Joe Shane, is he going to make the right decision? And I was on Rich Q's show earlier today, and he was asking me, well, what's it going to take, for some of these guys? What makes one of these jobs a plum apple? And I think a big thing is you have to have commitment from ownership in terms of, okay, I'm getting 3-4 years to build my program. Don't be too trigger happy and reactionary. When I have a young quarterback and my team goes 5-12, you got to give me a chance to kind of build this thing up, and then also select the guys that I want if I'm the head coach, being my position coaches, and then also a GM. Like we said, we have that familiarity with somebody you're on the same page with, so you don't have this situation like in Cleveland where the ownership group or whomever wants one quarterback and you're drafting a guy, overdrafting a guy in the third, and then you're swinging around getting a guy in the fifth who you probably didn't really want, and then you're signing. You already got Deshaun Watson mess there, and then yeah, and then you bring in Joe Flacco and you start him. So it's just like, what are you doing? I think you need to have a long term plan, and as you said, most of these teams they're in this coaching cycle. It seems every 2 to 3 years they're picking a coach, and the Giants always preach consistency, but they're doing a bad job picking coaches. You think about all the coaches they've gone through, Shermer and Joe Judge and McAdoo, and it's just ridiculous. So, out of all these jobs, if somebody said, Kevin, we're going to back up the Brinks truck, which one would you pick?
Probably the Atlanta job. I would probably take that. I still would, in my mind, because you have Drake London there also. You have Bijan. You have whatever Kyle Pitts is going to show up on offense. So on offense, you have a few weapons, but they need a quarterback still. And with the Giants, like you said, Scadaboo comes back, Jackson Dart, Malik Neighbors. You need some guys to be healthy, and both these guys have already showed a tendency to be hurt early in their careers.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how long it takes to fill these positions. Obviously, the GM spots are a lot more precious, and you're all right. Chris Greer, he's out with the Dolphins, and I wanted to get to your take with this. They're bringing in Troy Aikman to help them pick. All these broadcasters are trying to be like Tom Brady. They're getting involved, trying to get the money from everywhere. So, what do you think about Aikman coming in there as a Dolphin situation?
Aikman knows more than anybody they have in that franchise, probably in that office building right now. So, I mean, anything that he has to say, I'd listen to. I've seen the work that Aikman puts into like his broadcast and everything else. What was it? HBO had one of those specials on him, and the guy does his homework. And I can't think that Miami has a lot of I want to say intelligence with their with their team, but they've shown that they need a lot of help. So it couldn't hurt bringing in Troy Aikman for his opinion.
Yeah, and Stephen Ross, the owner there, he's been kind of known as a meddler, and in a situation where yeah, Aikman can come in there, maybe be a voice of reason. They have decided that Mike McDaniel is coming back, and McDaniel has already gone about, and I'm sure him and Aikman talk about this. They're going to pair him with somebody he knows. They brought a bunch of guys in from because McDaniel has those San Francisco ties, so there's a bunch of guys from San Francisco interviewing already for the Miami job. Josh Williams, he's football operations for San Fran. Tariq Ahmad, he's in the front office there in San Fran. R.J. Gillen could be the front runner. He's the assistant GM for the Niners. And then there's a guy for the Eagles, actually, assistant GM Alec Halliday. So a lot of people are talking to him as well. So we'll see how these GM positions shake out. I know a lot of teams like to get these things done before they head down to like the Senior Bowl in February after the Super Bowl and kind of get their staff in place because the draft is so important, as you're saying. And speaking of the draft here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029, the Game Coast Sports Digital Network, thanks for being with us. You just wonder how these teams are going to build in a draft. But let's get back to the games and we'll go local. I think this game showed Howie's got some work to do in the draft because the Philadelphia Eagles backups, Nick Sirianni, did not play his starters. The Philadelphia Eagles lose a game. A lot of their fans are upset about Kevin. They lose to the Washington Commanders 24-17, a game they could have won. And the unfortunate part is the Chicago Bears lose to the Detroit Lions, and that would have opened the door for the Philadelphia Eagles to be the number 2 seed. So first, talk about the Eagles' backups, and then to talk about this game overall.
It was one of those games, even leading up to it, all week I hear about, oh, Tanner McKee, oh, Tanner McKee, like he's Joe Montana coming out there. It's like enough with the Tanner McKee stuff, you know? Everyone with the Tanner McKee. He is what he is. He's a backup quarterback,
There it
you
is. Yep.
know? And it's like there's a reason why he's a backup quarterback. Now, could you maybe still get something for him in the offseason? Sure. You can probably move him for something. But at the same time, it's like don't act like he's anything than different than he is. And the fault of all this is on Nick Sirianni. I want to rest guys. I want to rest guys. You know who didn't get to rest? Devontae Smith because he got over 1,000 yards again for the third season in a row.
It's interesting that he did that.
Yeah, so Devontae Smith can, but Saquon can't go for the rushing record the year before. And I get it. We won the Super Bowl. I don't want to say we. The Eagles won the Super Bowl. It's a nice thing. But at the same time, if you got a chance to improve your position in the playoffs and have an extra home game, and you knew Dan Campbell coming out, that meathead came out and said he was trying to win that game. That was his little personal Super Bowl to make up for this bad season that they had. So Sirianni really fumbled their playoff position.
He did, and a situation once again where he's just stubborn, and even with the backups out there were key situations in the game, third and short, fourth and short, where the Philadelphia Eagles they were throwing the football. They did not run. They could have ran it down Washington's throat. They weren't stopping the Eagles. Bigsby was having a nice game, and you just wonder about the play calling, with Patullo and Sirianni. Once again, we don't know who's calling these plays, but whoever it is, they're doing a damn bad job. And I think it's Patullo, and he's trying to protect his guy.
Yeah, and the whole thing is, Lloyd, they're having problems doing it when the starters are in. So they're going to get, you would think if you had more backups playing, you would, dumb it down a little bit, just push the ball, run the clock. No, 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 no. Let's get Tanner McKee and everyone out there. Let's throw the ball. So, yeah, Patullo, there's no way he survives the season, especially if they lose in their first playoff game.
Yeah, and speaking of Tanner McKee, I agree with you because I had a lot of texters and emailers saying put him in, Hurts, especially after Hurts had a difficult game against the Bears, I believe. And McKee goes 21 of 40, 241, had one TD, one interception. He was sacked 3 times. And it just showed you he could not move away from pressure. He was indecisive. He missed some throws. And as you said, he's good in spurts, as a backup, maybe in mop up duty. But don't give me this guy's going to be a starter in the National Football League. And they could probably trade him for maybe a sixth rounder. You know what I mean? I had one guy text me. He was like, "Oh, trade him for a couple first round." I'm like, "No one's giving you a first round pick, let alone two first round picks for Tanner McGee." He is what he is. I mean, solid guy coming out of Stanford, knows the offense, which is always the curse of the backup. He knows the system, but you have to be able to perform it. So I hopefully people will back off that, and we'll preview the Eagles game against the Niners upcoming in a minute. But when you break down the numbers on this game, as I said, the defense they had their difficulty. Washington was 6 of 11 on third downs. They were 1 of 1 on fourth downs, and then conversely, the Eagles 6 of 14 on third down, 0 for 3 on fourth downs. And I think the biggest thing was this was Josh Johnson. You know what I mean? This game was there to be had. Josh Johnson's been in the NFL forever. I think he's like 38. This is only his second victory as starting quarterback. So this game was there to be had. But the biggest play I wanted to get your take on is Johnson ran for a touchdown. And all along, people were saying, "Oh, the Eagles are fine at backup corner." All along, Kaylee Ringo may have had one of the worst games I've ever seen. He turns his back, inexplicably lets Johnson walk into the end zone for the game-winning score. And then you also have Jacorian Bennett, who they got from the Raiders. He's not good either. So if Adoree Jackson, who's not the best, gets hurt, the Eagles have some problems.
Yeah, yeah, they do. They're not the team that was clicking going into the playoffs last year. There's definitely more holes on that team you can see right now. They're just not fluid. They're not flowing well together. There's animosity you feel behind the scenes, and it does come with winning a Super Bowl. Sometimes egos get inflated, and it's the Rocky three, before the Mr. T fight, it's sitting there, they're sitting there and living off their past,
You ain't been hungry
accolades.
since you won that title.
Exactly. So, do I see the Eagles going back to the Super Bowl this year? Nah, there's too many glaring holes, I think, and I think we all see it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because everybody remembers back in August, my Super Bowl pick was the Eagles against the Bills. It's still alive, but I just don't see that happening. Both those teams are kind of leaking oil going into the playoffs, and we'll see how it turns out. But you know, a win for Washington. Somebody had to win the game. It was an ugly watch. I was watching all the games, so thank goodness I wasn't regulated to the old days. With the rabbit ears where I only have one game to watch, Kevin. But it was a tough watch, and what they did get right though, the Eagles. Jake Elliott didn't miss any kicks. I mean, you said don't worry. Is this something Eagles fans should put to bed before they go into the playoffs?
No, not at all. If I was an Eagles fan, and I tend to lean that way, I would be nervous watching every kick like this for the rest of the postseason.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. And can you imagine if he misses a kick like Luke did? I mean, he won't be able to walk around town. I remember, and you'll remember this. You and Angel back in the day. I met Tommy Hutton,
Mm.
and Tommy Hutton and I were probably around the same age. And that poor guy. I mean, he couldn't go out anywhere, and people actually recognize him, which is ridiculous. He was the punter for the Eagles, and he dropped a game-winning snap. Basically, they were going to kick an easy field goal against the Cowboys of all teams, and he dropped the snap, and he couldn't go anywhere after that.
Yeah, that was the Bonio game, wasn't it?
I
Where they
believe
said,
so.
yeah, it was botched and they tried running it down. Oh man, I was mad back then. Yeah, but I couldn't pick them off the street. But yeah, that's how people do, man. People don't forget.
Yeah, they were like Tommy Hutton. You're dead, man. People are ridiculous, and they can't get over these type of things. And I get it. It's usually the younger versions of yourself. As you get older, I guess you get some wisdom. Every week I watch all the games with Nate and I listen to him yelling and screaming at the TV, and it's just after a while it's like, oh, we've seen so many games and anything can freaking happen out there, and
Hmm.
just go ask the Ravens. You know what I mean? And some of the Ravens fans are bringing up, oh, what remind me of Billy Cundiff. When he missed that kick for them, and there's always scars in terms of kickers and when they have the glory, Like Jake Elliott against the Giants that time, making a 61-yarder in magical 2017 season for the Eagles. And then there's other times you're like, how did he miss that? And I remember when I was a kid, the Eagles lost a playoff game to the Bucks, and their kicker got hurt, and Mike Michelle, the punter, had to. I think, and too bad we don't have Ray on. He probably covered this game. Mike Michelle missed the easy kick against the Bucks, and he wasn't even their kicker, and people still killed him. So it's like kicking, but they have one job to do. Okay, one job to do. Just do it. They usually don't get hit unless it's a kickoff, and usually they're making business decisions on that kickoff. So get it done. And it's funny. My one buddy texts me right away. My buddy Brian's like, kickers being kickers, and you know, so tough week, and we'll see how the Eagles move into the playoffs. But actually, it was they could have got that number 2 seed, and that's a game that might bite them in the butt because they may have
Oh,
to
yeah.
go to Chicago or somewhere else, and you always want to have that chance to have that home game. So a lot of Eagles fans listen to I was radio all day. Have been complaining about that, but we're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Digital Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We are on the Odyssey app as well. Definitely find our show on there and all the shows on the Coast Sports Digital Network. Just so search Coast Sports Digital Network. Thanks for being with us this evening. All right, we'll keep jumping around on some of these games, and then we will go over all our lackeys and on game balls, all that stuff. So speaking of the Tampa Bay Bucks, they beat the Carolina Panthers 16-14. What a snooze game. I think the officials got involved a little too much. I saw some memes like, you know, the officials helping the Bucks get this done, all that stuff. But the Bucks win the game, but Carolina backs into the playoffs. I think they've lost 3 straight games backing into the playoffs, and it thanks to the Atlanta Falcons. All the teams in the NFC South 8-9 with 3-3 records in the division. I mean, the division's awful.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. The funny thing is, for some of us who may have bet the over before we saw the weather that game, the thing is watching it, they scored more points when it was pouring rain. The second half, they couldn't score anything. It was a bad watch, and it was one of those. You realize the gravity of the game because winning the division and everything, but at the same time, it was one of those you could turn your head away from and then glance back a little later.
Yeah, definitely. And Baker Mayfield, he's a gamer who's out there trying to get it done. And Chase McLaughlin had 3 field goals, but it was a sloppy game, as you said, the weather. And then when you're looking at Carolina Panthers, I think they're ready to be had in the playoffs because they're a team that's just sloppy. And Bryce Young, let's face it, he's not a frontline quarterback. And you're starting to wonder, you know, how much of a reach he was as that first overall pick.
Yeah, on one side, I've seen a few games at the end of his first year and this year as well, where it's like, okay, you might have a little something, you might have, but he just turtles up and regresses, and he's not taking that step to lead and guide a team, but he's going to get some playoff exposure. So let's see how he shows up for that one. It's like you just don't know what you're getting with that guy.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we'll see Ted McMillan, and he helped me to make the finals, but Kevin, he's been kind of struggling the last couple weeks in terms of catches, only about 1 catch, and they're going to have to find somebody because Dowdle is not running the football hard, it seems, and Chuba Hubbard, so not a lot there. Uh, we'll see how the Carolina does, but yeah, the Bucks win, their season's over, and then it's looking like Ty Bowles is going to survive for the Bucks. Are you surprised if he survived and didn't get his pink slip today?
No, I'm not. I mean, think about how he's just cranked out division win after division win before this past year. So, I mean, he had a little, mini dynasty for that horrible division. So that came to an end. I mean, he's done a decent job. He's won some playoff games. He beat the Eagles. It's just one of those things. It's just like, all right, who are you bringing in besides him? I think he gets one more run, definitely.
Yeah, and I think maybe he'll clean up some things in terms of the roster. Him and Jason, like the GM, they'll clean up their roster. They have some age on that roster, and they need some health because that whole Chris Godwin situation was indicative of this team. He's in and out of the lineup. Of Mekabuka started out on House of Fire, and then he kind of fizzled out at the end of the year. Mike Evans, we're not sure what's happening with him, with this team, with his age and his contract being up. So, yeah, they're going to go back to the drawing board, but Carolina moves into the playoffs. The other game on Saturday was Seattle Seahawks beat the Niners, who are going to play the Eagles. It was 13-3. They secure the NFC West and the number one overall spot in the NFC. This was a good watch, but it was a black and blue game. I mean, they beat up each other. And what impressed me was Seahawks ran the ball down and threw for 180 rushing yards of about almost 4 to 5 yards a pop, and the Niners couldn't stop them.
Seattle is a scary team right now because they have a team. You got a team that's going to be playing at home as long as they're in the postseason. Also, you have a team that can run the ball well and plays defense. Those are scary combinations. Factor in also a quarterback who really doesn't turn the ball over that much, and especially after that 4-pick game he had against the Rams earlier this year. So if he's holding on to the ball and not turning it over, Seattle's going to be a tough out.
Yeah, and that's the X factor. Is Sam Darnold. Can fans believe in him going into the playoffs, Kevin? Everybody remembers that Vikings game last year. He was awful, and well, they're like Darnold being Darnold. I mean, but he's had back-to-back 14-win regular seasons, and that only Tom Brady did that before.
Yeah, I mean, it's rarefied air, that's for sure. It's not names you would normally put together, but at the same time, it's like you got to give them a little bit of credit for that.
Yeah, so Darnold, we'll see. And they're going to have their bye. They're getting healthy, and their offense coordinator Clint Kubiak, he has been mentioned for a lot of these jobs that are out there. So he'll be looking, and we'll see how it turns out. But as you said, they can run the football effectively with Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, and then they have JSN. And then the defense is just attacking with Leonard Williams, Ernest Jones IV, Reek Woolen. They just have playmakers at every spot, it seems, in that defense. So that defense is scary. So, and that's what you want this time of year. So good win for the Seattle Seahawks, and they get the number one overall spot going into the playoffs in the NFC. The next game, and we'll just touch on this briefly. The Browns won again. They beat the Bengals 20-18. They couldn't save Stefanski's job, but Myles Garrett breaks the NFL record for sacks. He gets his 23rd sack, and they lift him up. Was that necessary? Lifted him up in the middle of the game. I mean, he wasn't Walter Payton breaking Jim Brown's record.
Well, first off, the sack was a little weak, a little suspect, actually. Just to throw it out there, it wasn't Strahan Favre weak, but it was weak. You got to think about the Cleveland Browns. It's been a long time since they've celebrated anything. So, I mean, since like Otto Graham, when they won. So, yeah, I get it, man. You got to make a lot out of it, but it kills me though. These teams that are bad that need this kind of help in the draft position keep winning at the end of the year. It's like nobody gets the memo. It's like, no, don't win.
Yeah, because that game it was basically over. Jamar Chase was having a big time game. Joe Burrow was hitting him over and over again, and you're like, okay, the Bengals are going to walk away with this one. But the Browns are scrappy, and as you said, what are you doing? You got the Browns, you got the Giants. These guys are winning. The only one that gets it right is the Jets. I mean, the Jets are god awful. They're terrible. Even the Raiders won, and they didn't lose. They didn't lose the top spot because of it. But man, the Chiefs, they can't do anything without Patrick Mahomes. But in terms of the Jets, I mean, the Jets are just god awful. The Buffalo Bills beat up on the Jets 35-8, and this is they kind of did what I thought maybe the Eagles should do. They played some of their guys early, and then they got them out the game. But Mitchell Trubisky had a nice game for them, and they blow them out, as I said, 35-8, securing the sixth spot. Are the Bills going to be dangerous in that sixth spot going on the road? Can they win some games?
I will put it this way because I know we're going to get into the games a little bit. If they get past that first game, they're going to go in a little bit of a heater. But the key is to getting past that first game.
Yeah, I agree with you. And they do have the piece. They got the quarterback. They got the rushing attack with James Cook. Their defense is getting healthy at the right time. Maybe they'll get Bosa out there and Bernard and some of the other guys out there all as a collective unit. But they could be scary, but they do have a tough game coming up. So good quality win for them. But as I said, the Jets, they're probably the worst team in the National Football League, in my opinion. I mean, it, and I think the Raiders beat the Kansas City Chiefs 14-12. They didn't even want Max Crosby to play in this game. I mean, I guess Pete Carroll gave a final FU to everybody by winning this game.
Well, it was funny because they first said Max Crosby wasn't playing, and then a day later they had to come out. Oh no, he's injured. Yeah, that's why we're making him sit out. Yeah, yeah, it's not because we're not, trying to win, because they were starting to investigate a little bit around, for tanking purposes and whatnot. The thing is, I want to see the picture of the green room in next year's draft when the voice comes over the monitor and says, now on the clock, the New York Jets. And I want to see all the guys who are about to be drafted in the green room, eyes darting like, not me, not me, not me. Nobody wants to go to that team. That's a fact.
Yeah, and you start looking at the college football playoffs and watching that a lot. Fernando Mendoza seems like a nice kid, and he's going to end up on a very bad team, whether it's the Raiders or the Jets or something like that. But do you think it's going to be Fernando Mendoza? He's the Heisman Trophy winner. Do you think he's the number one overall pick? They're talking about more as well from Oregon. He's still in the Final Four too. So do you think it's going to be one of those two guys?
Yeah, yeah, I do. And I think if I'm Mendoza, I'd rather go to the Raiders out of the two. I mean, you got Bowers, you got Genty, who was drafted that they couldn't do anything with this year. At least you have maybe something to work with. The Jets, I mean, Brees Hall, how happy is he right now? Garrett Wilson was hurt the whole second half of the season. So I think maybe, with Vegas and Brady being there, at least, Brady's going to try to win and bring you something in there. I'd rather be in that situation.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Mendoza, it's looking like he's going there. He's going to do well in his interviews and everything. The only thing with me is I don't know if he's got that grit. You know what I mean? He reminds me of Joey Harrington. A nice kid, he looks the part. Very polite, team leader and everything. But you got to get it done on the field. So we'll see if Mendoza is able to do that in National Football League. But he's doing a nice job in the college football playoffs. Have you been watching any of these games? And did you see Eagles buddy Michael Irvin? I mean, he lost his mind when Miami won. He took his belt off and he started beating the Kohler. He's jumping all around. I was like, oh my God, look at this guy. He never changes.
Well, you're at a point right now. It's like, all right, Unc, keep your belt on. There's no need. Keep the pants up. You get to a certain age, it's like we get it, man. You're living your college days right now, but it's like it's not about you. Celebrate a little bit. Don't get that crazy. So I'm shocked that Miami's made the run they've made, though. That one, it also shows the fact too. The bye week, besides Indiana, it's actually messed with some of these other teams. And just
Yeah.
to throw in one last part, Ole Miss with Chambliss on that. If anyone's watched that last game against Georgia, he couldn't throw an incompletion if he tried. He was hitting everybody.
Yeah, he was. He was playing big time. And Ole Miss, they, he's a transfer. He came in through the portal, and he's done a nice job. Dual threat guy. I'm already hearing he's going back to school,
Yeah,
which is surprising because the class for 2027 is going to be big time in the National Football League draft. I mean, you're going to have Arch Manning and a bunch of other quarterbacks coming out. But yeah, Chambliss played really well. I'm interested to see is it going to be chalk or what's going on. But as you said, there's been some surprises and some upsets, particularly Miami playing very well, and maybe they're back in the mix. But it's going to be interesting for college football. And then, as you said, the prize for the person, the number one quarterback, is you get to be a Raider, you get to be
yeah,
a Jet. Yeah, and try to make the best of this kid. And they'll probably call Zach Wilson and start talking to him. Even Sam Darnold could tell him a little bit about
yeah.
how awful it is to be a Jets high quarterback draft pick. So we'll see. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Digital Network. Kevin and I running down the games for Week 18, and then we'll keep moving on. Some of these games not even worth talking about. The Denver Broncos, they get past the Los Angeles Chargers 19-3. They moved to 14-3. They're number one overall seed. Did we learn anything from this game? I mean, it's. I look at Denver and I'm like, I think they could be beat in the playoffs. They're not that prohibitive, number one seed. What are you thinking about them?
The one thing I will say, and that I would gush about, is the fact that one thing I was definitely wrong about was when Sean Payton took that job in Denver. I was like, why are you taking that job? That is not a great job. Man, as he turned it around. They went and sat there. They made the little run last year, and this year they come out and get the number one seed. It's not that impressive on paper. It really isn't. They do the things right to win football games. They don't seem to, choke up in the big moments. And it's going to be tough playing out there in Denver. But would I be surprised if they lost? No, not at all.
Yeah, it did. They're number one seed, and Bo Nix is playing pretty well. But every game of theirs, not this week, but most of their games, like one score game, and you're like, they won, but that defense that Vance Joseph has, I mean, they have playmakers all over the place with Sertain, the second, and he's the former defensive player of the year, and they have Bonito getting all those sacks and Zach Allen. So they're a dangerous team. I do want to see, can RJ Harvey establish the run, because I'm not sure if Dobbins is going to be able to come back in the postseason from that foot injury, and you have to run the ball effectively, as we said, in the playoffs. You got to be able to run the football. You got to have those explosive plays, and then of course you got to protect the football. So good win for the Denver Broncos, and we'll see from there. All right, we'll start transitioning over to talk about some of the other big things here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. The stats: home teams were 12-4 this week. I mean, it just showed you, like, wow. After the visiting teams had a pretty good week 17. In terms of the gambling aspects, there were 7 covers. There were three non-covers where the team that was favored won, but they didn't cover the number. Still a lot of outright underdog winners, Kevin. 6 of them. You had Vegas, Washington, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, the Giants, and then you had Detroit as well. So, did any of those underdog winners surprise you?
The whole thing is with the last week of the season, it's the worst week for somebody who gambles on the NFL. Unless you have your games that are set in stone, I didn't touch anything except the games that mattered. And I got lucky, I will say, I guess, with the Detroit Chicago game. I had the Lions winning that one outright, and I had Pittsburgh winning outright as well. So easily could have lost both of those. But as far as the other games go, when guys are just plugging in guys to finish up the season, that's the biggest gamble of them all because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, you sure don't. And factors in teams that are, fantasy football guys are still playing the last season. You just don't know what's going on, and yeah, it's crazy. And not a lot changed in terms of the seedings. Um, but we did have a flip flop, like Buffalo dropped to the sixth spot. Obviously, the NFC, Seattle got the number one spot, and then San Francisco dropped all the way to the sixth spot. But not a lot of moving around and jockeying for position. The Eagles, as we said, they had their chance to be number 2, but they didn't seize it. So they're going to be the number 3 seed going in. But very interesting stuff. And that's the drama of Week 18. It's not all the preseason rosters that are basically out there. It's the jockeying for position, and there were some good storylines, and thank goodness for that game, to end the night that really kind of tied a bow on it. All right, let's jump over to game ball winners, lackeys for Week 18 around the National Football League here in Lloyd Vance Insider Football. I'll go with. Why don't we go with lackey first? I'll let Kevin go first, and then I'll explain my pick.
All right. Once again, as we talked about, there's not a lot of games that had a lot of meaning to them on the last week of the season. I gotta go the low hanging fruit again on this one. Nick Sirianni, what are you doing? Just the thought of the fact that you could get a number 2 seed and guarantee yourself another home playoff game. You didn't even want to run these guys out here for the first half of the game. At least if you would have played them for the first half. Pay attention to see how the Lions and Bears are playing along, and then if it's that game's out of hand, pull your guys off the field. The fact that you tanked that game for the most part with, I don't know if you had too much faith in Tanner McKee or the rest of the team, But at the same time, that's what's going to get the Eagles knocked out of the playoffs is the fact they're going to have to go on that road.
Yeah, and like Herm Edwards said, you play to win the game. You know what I mean? And they
Mhm.
did. I don't, and if they're going to go to 17 games, 18 games, you got to win. You got to win these games and set up the best scenario to go into the playoffs. And now as the number 3 seed, the Eagles, yeah, they may have an uphill climb, but yeah, that's a good pick. I was on with Rich Q earlier, and he said you're not allowed to pick Tyler Loop. Don't pick on that poor kid. So I won't pick on a kicker, even though it's low hanging fruit. I'm going to go with the Eagles too, but I'm going with Kaylee Ringo. I mean, what are you doing? He's a former third round pick. They've talked him up for a number of years. One of the Georgia Bulldog Eagles, but he's not good. He's not good. Somebody was saying, well, his value is a gunner on his punt team. I'm like, come on, you can find another guy to do that. He just showed that he's not ready for prime time. And when he turned his back, as John Johnson was walking in the end zone, I mean, I could hear the collective groan all around the Delaware Valley. So, Kelly Ringo, you get the lackey, but you also could share it with Ja'Cory and Bennett. Neither of those guys, they shouldn't see the field. And there were a lot of backups for the Philadelphia Eagles. You're like, ooh, Howie's got some work to do. So that was my lackey. In terms of game ball winner, I gave it to the Patriots running back Ramondre Stevenson. I mean, I could thank goodness I didn't face him in fantasy with the week he had. 7 rushes for 131 and 2 TDs rushing. He also had 2 catches for 22 yards and another TD. So he had 3 total touchdowns in the Patriots 38-10 romp over the Dolphins. So he gets my game ball.
Yeah, that New England running combo is pretty scary because Henderson put up 2 touchdowns as well. So that's going to be their MO going forward. So Stevenson, though, when you get inside that red zone, he's going to be that guy seeing the ball. My game ball, though, on the other hand, is I'm looking at this and I have to give it to an organization. Because once again, last week, even the games that mattered, a lot of guys really, there wasn't someone who stood out that much. I'm giving it to as I'm scrolling through the standings and everything else. How about the Minnesota Vikings for finishing 9-8? Those quarterbacks that they trucked out there were horrible. Justin Jefferson didn't do anything the last month and a half of the season, almost 2 months, and they rattled off a record over 500, probably to their own detriment because it worsens their draft pick. But at the same time, Minnesota, way to stay competitive in a year that you could have easily bottomed out.
Yeah, Kevin O'Connell's done a great job holding that team together. Max Brosmer, even JJ McCarthy got involved a little bit in this game, but yeah, it was another situation where Green Bay basically put up the white flag. They went with their third string quarterback because they knew if they put Malik Willis out there, they had a chance to win. I just don't understand why you wouldn't try to win a game no matter what. Even, yeah, maybe protect a couple key guys, but you got to try to win the football game. So good win by the Vikings, and that's a good pick. I also give a shout out to Miles Garrett, obviously breaking the sack record. And then the Seattle Seahawks offensive line was just dominant. 39 rushes, 4.6 yards per carry, uh, and then 180 rushing yards in that win over the San Francisco 49ers. They actually might have given the blueprint to the Philadelphia Eagles. So good win for them. And they're my game ball winners and lackeys. Kevin's as well. Thanks for joining us this evening. We're jumping around here. Lots to get to around National Football League. A good thing is so many good storylines, things to talk about, and before we know it, the season's going to be over. But now it's time. We're going to start. We're going to start looking at the games upcoming, and we don't have the lines, but the early lines that I saw, Kevin, a lot of these lines are really close, except for one game, this first game, which is the LA Rams. They're 12-5. They're going to the Carolina Panthers 8-9. The Rams are a heavy road favorite. I think it's like 10 points or so already. When I look at this one, this is a revenge game. Don't forget, Week 16, the Rams lost down there in Carolina, and Stafford played extremely bad. I think Stafford's going to be ready to go in this one. You'll probably see a lot of Kyron Williams, but Puka Nakua and Devontae Adams should be back from his hamstring injury. So I expect the Rams to roll on the Carolina Panthers because the Panthers just they backed into this thing, and I think they're just happy to be at the dance.
Yeah, Carolina's kind of in uncharted territory right now. They don't really know. They haven't been there before. And the Rams, on the other hand, you got Matt Stafford, who's won a Super Bowl already. He knows what to do in those situations. The one thing I will say is that 5 spot in the NFC was probably the most coveted spot in all the playoffs because you knew you were getting Carolina or Tampa, a beat up Tampa team in that first round. So I think that one's a slam dunk. I would be shocked if the Rams lost to Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while you see a craziness. I still remember uh, the Saints losing to the Beastquake, you know, Seattle Seahawks. They had a losing record, and typically when a team has a losing record, they're just happy to be there, and they're going to roll over. And I think the Rams just have too much firepower, and their defense is kind of unsung, and they should be getting some guys back healthy, so they should be all over the Carolina Panthers. So Kevin and I agree on that one. The next game, Saturday, is the Green Bay Packers at the Chicago Bears. It's 8 p.m. on Prime. This is the oldest rivalry, one of the oldest rivalries in the National Football League, and they split earlier in this season. The only thing is Green Bay. We talked about them resting their guys, and ever since they lost Micah Parsons, they just have not been the same team. 9-7-1, kind of backing into this thing is just kind of like the Carolina Panthers. Chicago, they've been playing a lot better lately. Caleb Williams throwing the football effectively, and they've been running the football too. I think this is going to be the Chicago Bears winning a close game, probably on a field goal. So yeah, what do you think on this one?
I think with Micah Parsons, I might lean towards Green Bay, but the fact with him done for the season, I think you're right. They've been leaking oil. They've rested too many guys, and for them to have to just pick it up and go to Chicago and pull out a W, even though Caleb Williams playing in his first playoff game, you don't know what you're going to get. I think with the weapons, especially Loveland, the game that he had just now for the Bears, and all the 2 running backs and the wide receivers, I just think they have too much for Green Bay.
Yes, and I'm sure he's going to spread the football around to a variety of targets. And the key for them, obviously, is their offensive line has really come along. And then the Green Bay Packers, they traded Clark, who was probably their best run stuffer. They sent him to Dallas, and they really have had problems stopping the run. And their linebackers are beat up. So I expect Caleb Williams, as long as he doesn't make that big mistake, as you said, sometimes the lights get bright, and these guys in their first playoff game make mistakes. I think that the Bears, though, should win this one. Should be a good game to watch. That's 8 p.m. on Saturday night. Sunday, you have a full slate of you have 3 games on Sunday. The Buffalo Bills, 12-5, they are at the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is probably one of the marquee games, Kevin. 1 p.m. on CBS. Been back and forth in this one. I know Nate he's already pulling out the Jacksonville Jaguars hate because he wants his Bills to win this one, but I just think Josh Allen's going to put on the Superman cape. I think he's going to find a way to outplay the Jacksonville Josh Hines Allen and make some big plays in this one and cook. But it's going to be tough because Jacksonville is on a heater. I think they've won like 8-9 straight games. Trevor Lawrence playing extremely well, but I'll go with the Bills in this one, and it's probably going to be Lawrence making a mistake.
I agree that it's going to be the best game of the whole weekend. And the fact is, I I lean towards Jacksonville. That being said, though, I'm picking Jacksonville. But if Buffalo beats Jacksonville, Buffalo's going to the Super Bowl. That's how much of a run they're going to go on if they beat Jacksonville.
Yeah, I agree with you. If they can get by the Jags, they could be that team that could be extremely dangerous in terms of going on the road. They're a veteran team, and they could beat them. So, yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to watch. Both looking forward to that one. The mid-level game is the San Francisco 49ers 12-5 at the Philadelphia Eagles 11-6, and these two teams don't like each other. We know they played in a NFC Championship game a couple years ago, and Jalen Hurts had a big game in this one. I expect the Eagles to kind of use the blueprint like the Seattle Seahawks just did, to run the football at that Robert Salah defense that's very beat up. I expect the Eagles to be smart. As long as Patullo is calling the right plays, or Sirianni, whether they got to be smart. The home crowd will definitely be into this game. And you have a team coming from the West. I'll go with the Philadelphia Eagles in this one, and a close one. And Jake Elliott does make the kick this time.
I'm with you as well on this one. I think the Eagles win this game. I don't think it's pretty by any means. I just think San Francisco is a bad matchup for Philadelphia, I should say, is a bad matchup for San Francisco. I think they don't do well when they travel to Philadelphia. I think it gets in their dome a lot with the Philadelphia fans. And to be honest, if you look at the Niners and the health issues they've had all year, they've kind of overachieved to be where they're at. So I think it just comes to a head at a certain point.
Yeah, you definitely feel injuries going to are a big factor in this one. They won't have Fred Warner or someone. They won't have Nick Bosa, and they're two key guys for their defense. And I expect the Eagles to really, probably see a lot of Zach Bond kind of spying on Christian McCaffrey, keep him in check. And Brock Purdy, he's played very well recently, running around doing all the dances and everything. But once the Philly crowd gets after him, I think he's going to play a lot different. And he cannot forget he got knocked out the last time he was in
Yeah.
Philadelphia, and you know, is it the link is definitely going to be going nuts. So that's going to be a game that we'll all have our eyes on. But I think the Eagles pull this one out. But not everything is going to be all peaches and cream for them. They have some tough matchups in the NFC, and then if they do win, Sirianni is going to be pumping his chest talking about I was right,
Mhm.
resting these guys, and so we'll see how it turns
Yeah.
out. But yeah, we both think the Eagles win that one. The nightcap on Sunday is 8 p.m. on NBC. It's the Chargers 11-6 at the New England Patriots. The Chargers are coming from the West. They've been resting their guys. Obviously, the big thing is Justin Herbert has never won a playoff game. This is a big situation for him. But I think the Chargers have lost three straight games, and they're coming in kind of backing in to New England. And then you have Drake May, who I don't think we're going to have time to talk about it, but I think Drake May is going to win the MVP this season. I think May makes some big throws. And you talk about that two headed monster of Stevenson and Henderson in the backfield. And then their defense has got Gonzalez and they got Milton Williams back. So I think Herbert makes some mistakes and New England wins this one.
I just don't think the Chargers can punch with them, and sit there and push the ball down the field and control the time of possession. I think New England, with the running game that they have and the defense that they have, Vrabel's going to put them in situations to have the ball the majority of the time, and that's going to come back to bite the Chargers. So yeah, I like the Pats in this one.
Yeah, and yeah, and if you're betting, I that's one of the games I like. You know what I mean? I really like New England this week. I really like the Rams this week, but the Rams may have a big number to cover. But I definitely both those teams on the money line definitely look at that. The last game that we're going to preview here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 Game Coast Sports Digital Network is the Houston Texans 12-5. They are at the Pittsburgh Steelers 10-7, and Mike Tomlin did it. It wasn't even close in terms of having a winning season. He had the Steelers get it done against their divisional rival, the Ravens. We broke that game all down earlier in the show, but the Texans seem to be a different animal at this time season. I think they've won 6 games in a row. They started 0-3. CJ Stroud's doing a nice job in terms of being efficient with the football. You'd like to see Woody Marks run the ball a little bit more, Nick Chubb, but I think they have enough to beat the Steelers. The Steelers, they're old. You got Cam Hayward out there. Watts looking a little old coming back from that lung injury, and teams can move the football on them. So the Texans have a lot of weapons in terms of Nico Collins and some of their, Dalton Schultz is a good tight end. I think they'll be able to move the football on them. I think they win in Pittsburgh, but it's not going to be easy because it's going to be cold out there. The wind and the kicking situation may factor into this again, but I think that with that defense, they're going to get after Rodgers and he'll make some mistakes. So I'm going Texans.
I haven't seen any of the lines, of course, or anything, but that over under has got to be in the 30s. I do not envision Vegas thinking there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game. I would lean towards the Texans as well. I think Pittsburgh is happy to get where they got. I think once again, this is going to be another game that's like a field goal. I think the majority of the games this weekend are a field goal. And it just depends at the back end who has the ball. But yeah, with the way the Texans are playing, CJ Stroud, he just seems, especially early in games, the first quarter, likes to throw the deep ball. He likes to throw that deep ball and see if he can get a touchdown early. So watch for that in this game. But yeah, I'll lean towards the Texans with this one also.
Yeah, and the Steelers on that back end with Duggar, they're having problems covering that deep ball. You saw Zay Flowers get behind that coverage twice, and I could see Nico Collins kind of doing that again. So good matchup for the Texans, and they're a physical team. They're another one. if they win this game, they could be dangerous the next round in the playoffs. So another great week here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 Game Coast Sports Digital Network. Thanks for everybody hanging it with us. Had some audio problems early on, but we got it taken care of. Angel, great job behind the glass. Kevin, thanks for being with us. And everybody enjoy the games, and we'll see who was right, who was wrong when we talk next week on Lloyd Vance Insider Football.